Hi my friends, in this video we are going to learn token authentication. We learned basic authentication in the previous video. If you haven't watched the previous video, I recommend you to watch it. It is an important video to establish the basics. Now if we get back to the subject, what is a token authentication? Token-based authentication is a protocol that generates encrypted security tokens. It enables users to verify their identity to servers, which then generates a unique encrypted authentication token. We are going to examine in more detail, but the important point is to know when to use token authentication. Django's official documentation says token authentication is appropriate for client-server setups such as native desktop or mobile clients. In fact, it wouldn't be good to talk about a single method for authentication. I can't say tokens must be used for mobile clients. Our aim in this series is to learn authentication methods, and then we will decide whichever is appropriate for our project or whichever seems more advantageous to you. Once you learn the authentication methods, it will entirely be up to you to choose one of them. Let's take a look at how tokens work. We have a client on one side and a server on the other. Let's say this client wants to log in. The client sends the username and password to the server. The server, in our case Django, checks username and password. If they are valid, it creates an unique token. And then this token is saved to the database with one-to-one relationship. And the token is ready. It is an ID that represents the client. Afterwards, this token is sent to the client. The following question is that what if the user wants to access an endpoint that requires authentication? How do tokens come into play? The new scenario is this client wants to access an endpoint. This client needs to send his own token to the server in the authorization HTTP header, just like we saw in the basic authentication. And then the Django server captures this token and determines to which user it belongs. And then Django allows the client to access the endpoint that client wants. And the result, as long as the client has this token, he can access the data that requires authentication without relogin. Now that we have an idea of what token authentication is, we can move on to practice. I created a simple Django project, and we have only one view which catches the user from request, and it returns the user information only. If we go back to the browser, we only have such an endpoint. We are anonymous user because we haven't been authenticated yet. So I go back to the editor. First of all, I am going to add the permission class so that only authenticated users can access this view. So I need to import permission classes from decorators, and I need to edit here permission classes. I also need to import permissions from REST framework. I will use the isAuthenticated permission. I'm going to show you isAuthenticated. If you don't know permissions, there are videos about it. You can watch them on my channel. Okay, I save it, and I go back to the browser again, refresh the page. Okay, now it's asking for credentials. Good. Now I need to determine an authentication method. So to do that, I need to import authentication classes from decorators, and of course I need to define it, and I need the authentication from REST framework, authentication dot, and we are going to use token authentication. I save it and go back to browser, refresh page. Look, we see that the value of www authenticate is token. So Django expects a token. If you don't know what www authenticate is, you should watch the basic authentication video. But to summarize it, we need to send a token in the authorization key in the request header, which will represent a user on the Django side, just like we did in the basic authentication. If you watch the basic authentication video, you will remember we sent a complex expression converted to base 64 in request header. So we are going to do the same for token authentication. However, there must be a token that we can send. How do we create this token? What I said in the slide, we need to create a token and save this token to the database with one-to-one relationship. So we need to create a new model for it, and we are going to use some modules of Python to create unique tokens like with or Binance. However, I have good news for you. Django developers had created a model for us, prepared the necessary modules to create the unique tokens, and they prepared the view which allows to create a token. You may wonder that, can't we do these things ourselves? Of course we can actually, and I am even thinking of creating a custom authentication class in this series. But now I will use the Auth token app that comes with REST framework for token authentication. I used the word app because it is an app, just like we create in Django. I mean, like we create users here. It is an app, and it comes with REST framework. We just need to add it to installed apps in settings. If you go back to the Django documentation, details are mentioned here. We are on the token authentication. We just need to add this to installed apps. So I just copy it, go to settings, and I just paste it here. I save it. Look, when I added that, the number of migrations increased from 18 to 21. Look, we can see it here. First the migration was 18, and then after I added this to installed app, it became 21. Remember what I said, we had to create a new model for tokens, but since this app includes that model, our migration number has increased. Actually, we are going to take a look at the model and views, so I'm going to import it. So let's say where to import it. I'm going to import it in the URLs. You can import it wherever you want. We are just going to take a look at the app actually. So I'm going to import it from REST framework, auth token, and let's say we are going to see the models. I right click and go to definition. The model that we were going to create has already been created by Django developers. We have a one-to-one relationship here with user, and if I scroll down a bit, the save method is overridden. Here this method is used to create a unique token. If we examine this method, it's here. It generates an expression consisting of bytes of 20 characters. So don't be confused by the code here. As I said, it is generated in bytes, and the code is used to convert this expression from bytes to string. The save process has been complete after this token is created. We can even write these things ourselves. It's not too much complicated actually. I close it, and I want to take a look at the views. I go to definition. Look, we have a view here, obtain auth token. I think it wouldn't be wrong to say it is login view. This view asks for a username and password, and it returns the token as a response. So if we create a URL and use this view, users will be able to get tokens by entering their username and password. I will show you that. I go to the URLs. We are in the main URLs actually, and I'm going to define a new path. Let's say login, and I'm going to use this view. We start obtain all token. I save it. I go back to the browser, and let's go to the login endpoint. We couldn't see the browsable API. I want to go back to the view here. We can't see the browsable API because the renderer classes has been set as JSON renderer. That's why we can't see the browsable API. So I don't need it. I will make it command for now. Go back to browser and refresh. Okay. The form in which we can enter username and password has been appeared. Now we need to do the migrations and create a user. I'm going to do it quickly. And I'm going to create super user, and we rerun the server. Okay, go back to browser, refresh it again. Now I write the username and password. I click post. Look, our token has been created. As I said, it is so simple actually, because REST framework has built-in app for generate a token. Now it's time to test the token and learn how to use it. I go back to the editor. You will remember we have a view that can be accessed by only authenticated users. So we are going to access this view, and I'm going to use Postman for that. I have mentioned in the previous video, Postman is a tool we use to test our endpoints. So I will copy the endpoint, but first we need to check that what it was. So I need this token, so I'm going to write the endpoint here, API users. We will try to access this endpoint, so I copy it, go to the Postman. I'm going to create a new tab. I paste it. If we make a GET request, we got the same result. Authentication credentials were not provided. Okay, we are going to use this token to access this endpoint. So I just copy it, go to Postman, but I want to remind you how to send tokens. We were doing it with authorization key in the request header. We can see the header sent by Django, and we can see the information of the server like that, and the allowed methods and some other information here. We also see www authenticate, which is token. It means that Django server accepts for token authentication. We are going to send the token as the value of the authorization key. We have a request headers here. The request headers are parsed by Django, and Django tries to get the authorization information from the header. We will see it in a moment. So we need to write the token in the request header. So we need to write authorization, and then we need to write token because we send a token, but we can also change it. We are going to see it in a moment. And we just need to paste the token that we copied from here. If I click send, look, this time I accessed my endpoint successfully. If we go back to the Django site, let's see what's going on there. I will go to the source code of token authentication. I scroll down a bit. Okay. First of all, when we make a request, the authenticate method is triggered in token authentication. When this authenticate method is triggered, the get authorization header method works. So let's go to the method. This method captures the value of authorization. So check the name here, get authorization header. It means it tries to capture the value here. It checks for the authorization key. It tries to find the authorization in the header, and it just gets the value. After it captures the value, it just returns it. So if we go back to the authenticate method here in the token authentication, and the value returned by this method is assigned to a variable. So I'm going to print it. Let's say auth of variable in authenticate in token. I save it. I go back to the Postman and I'm going to make a new request. Okay, we did it, and go back to the editor. Look, we got the token here. Look, if I scroll down a little bit, the token is encoded and decoded, and then the authenticate credentials method works. The authenticate credentials method detects whether there is such a token or not, and the token belongs to which user. After all this process, if the user has permission, he can access the endpoint he wants. Actually, this is how token authentication works. I hope it was helpful. I'm going to make another video about token and a logout process. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.